Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond the Pulpit. This is a podcast where we have some conversations on the topics that we handle in our Sunday services. We're so glad that you are joining us today, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey guys, today we are speaking about the Song of Songs. It is a topic Kobus is greatly excited about and I am greatly confused about, and I think we're going to learn a lot today. So once again, just some context, we are in our binge reading the Bible series, a series that is going through the entire Bible, speaking about why is this book in the Bible, and I've kind of pushed for this entire series for this very book, and we're going to start there. Kobus, why is the Song of Songs in the Bible?
Nobody knows.
That was easy. Thank you very much
Yes.
for joining.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
But seriously, bro, you had so much fun prepping for this. Your sermon delivery last night was really good. Well done. And
Thanks,
we can from the very get-go, we can see that you were really passionate about it. You were really excited about it. Is it just because of the sexual content, or is it because you discovered something amazing?
Yes, man. It was fun is one way to put it. In prepping for this, fun is a relative term. It was actually really difficult. I was very excited about this because I thought in prepping for this that we're going to have a chance to speak about relationships, which is something that I'm very passionate about, and marriage and sex and stuff like that. But actually, starting to prep for this, I realized that this book is much more complex than I thought. And just to say that this book is just about romantic love, it's much more complex than that, and the Song of Songs fits into the Bible in a very unique and specific way, which was actually very difficult to convey and very difficult to speak about, once again, as we say every week, in 20 minutes. So we unpacked it and we looked at it and we addressed one theme at the end, but it was actually really tough. For one reason, I think we're going to chat about this a bit later as well, but the fact that most of the commentators that speak about this book and that comment on the contents of the book, they don't actually agree. I would read one commentator and he would say that this part of the book is interpreted in this way and it means this. And then you would read somebody else and he would say, no, it actually means something totally else. And whoever says that it means this is wrong and this is right. So it's really confusing. And when you start delving into the book, there's all these conflicting thoughts and there's just no way of knowing what is really right. And it was really frustrating, actually. So I am passionate about those topics, but it was actually really difficult to go to this book and really figure out what's the one thing that it's talking about. You know,
Cool. And if you could nail it in one sentence, pun intended, what is this book about?
The Song of Songs is a bunch of erotic Hebrew poetry that we get to read for some reason.
That sounds good. And this just leaves me with more and more mystery. So let's dive into those difficulties, bro. What is, because when I hear also about people preaching from this book, it's very much like, no, this is about Jesus' love for us and stuff. I'm like, no, it's not. If you read the context, surely it's not. How do we reconcile those two viewpoints where it's not but it is?
Yep. So if you go back, obviously it's a Hebrew book, and before Christianity was around, before Jesus came and the whole shift came from Judaism to Christianity, in the Jewish context, this book was many times read what we call allegorically, and they saw it as a symbolism between God and Israel. The man in Song of Songs being God, and his love for the woman is just God's love for Israel. And they would read the constant back and forth compliments and as worship and ministry from God. Then the Christian church came along, and they also allegorically interpreted it as the man being God or Jesus, and the woman being the church. And they would relate it to verses like Ephesians 5:25 that says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her to make her holy. And they would interpret it like that. And once again, it's so tough to really know what's true because the commentators don't agree on this. The guys who have spent their lives studying the Bible are not in agreement, which doesn't happen a lot. Most of the time when you read something about a scripture in the Bible, most of the scholars and the guys would agree. Except if you go to the extremes, obviously. There are always going to be extremes. But the majority of people who read these books normally agree on things. Not so with Song of Songs, for some reason. So I'm also with you. I think that this book and its very basic nature, as I said, is just it's love poetry between two people. What that teaches us is another story, and why us as Christians in the 21st century are supposed to read a book, because I think that's the thing this series is getting into. We want to give context for why you should go read these books, why you should go back and read books that you normally wouldn't read on a normal basis. I mean, we get so stuck in the New Testament, we get so stuck on the cliche verses, we forget about these books, and I think that's the heart of the series, is to get people to read these books again. So it was really, once again, it was tough to give people a reason to read Song of Songs, because it's just love poetry. It's like love songs, actually. Poetry and singing was very much connected in Israel. Same with what we said with Psalms. Most of them are songs that was sung in the temple. Same with Song of Songs. They are Hebrew love poems that people sang to each other. And why we have to read them, that's the question.
Yeah, I think I love what you're saying, because you're giving us a lot of cultural context, and I think as outsiders from that culture, it's very arrogant of us to say, okay, this is weird, because we have no idea. We actually don't. While reading to prep for this, actually, I was reading through my my NIV Bible, and they usually have introductions for the books. And what this one said is, like, this was a common wedding exchange. Where a guy and a girl would sing this to one another. And I don't know if you've ever seen The Chosen, where they have, like, one of the early episodes, they kind of show a normal Shabbat kind of practice, where the guy would stand up and he would recite a psalm, and she would stand up and she would recite, they both recite Proverbs 31. And I feel like maybe this is what happened. And we don't know, and that's the problem. Like, we're not around, and I don't think any of us have been in a Jewish culture enough to understand what's going on. So there's a lot of gray area that we just don't know. And I like your approach to it, especially connecting it to Jesus, because Jesus also uses the wedding symbolism. He says that I'm going away and I'm preparing a place for you. That's a common wedding practice. And we see that in Song of Songs, and you spoke about that in your sermon. So explain that a little bit. Why is there this back and forth? Why are they not together?
Yeah. So, as you said, I try and delved into it in the sermon, and the reason for this podcast is that we can go deeper into that. Because, once again, in 20 minutes, what can you achieve? We just scratched the surface of these books. In terms of your question, really interesting. So, once again, differing opinions on this, but most of the commentators are agreed that these two people are actually not married, the two characters in the Bible. We can talk about the theory of a love triangle as well. Maybe that's something we can get into. There's this theory that there's actually not just the two characters, but three. That is scandalous. Very scandalous. But I think in terms of what you asked, the commentators are more or less in agreement that these two people are engaged to be married. And you can go watch the sermon. I do delve into the difference between engagement in ancient Israel, and engagement today, where engagement back then was a binding contract, and it was really expensive to get out of it. You paid up front for the privilege to be married to somebody. But in terms of that, it's a very difficult question to answer, because as you read this book, you see as you said, there's this separation, and the girl has these dreams where she's looking for the guy. And she dreams about this one instance where he comes to her door, to her room. He knocks. He says, "Let me in," but there's a separation. The door is locked. It gets so intense that he actually has to reach through the door to try and open it, but it's locked. And then even in her dream, she opens the door and he's gone. There's a separation, which the commentators use that type of language to say these two have an intense desire for each other, but they don't have access to each other. I don't know if that answers your question.
It really does. So they are engaged, and that's kind of the scene. So we can, if we want to, read the metaphor of, like, because that's what the metaphor Jesus used. Like, we're his bride to be, and he's the guy coming back eventually to come and fetch us, which is a very Jewish thing. And you also highlighted this. You called it a cutscene kind of situation, where there's this repeated verse. I completely forget it, but it's something on the lines of the woman saying, "Do not arouse love before it is due." What does that mean?
It's actually quite a rhythm that repeats 4 times in the book, where things start to get heated, and we kept it PG-13 last night with a sermon, because it really it speaks of sexual tension. It speaks of these two people having an intense physical desire for one another, And it doesn't say that it's wrong. That's the other thing. That the book never says that these things are wrong. It does, however, say when things get heated, there are these rhythms of they have this desire for each other. They are complementing each other's physical appearance. It's a very physical thing that they are after, and this keeps going back and forward. It builds up to a point where it's very heated and it's leading somewhere. I know one guy, Tim Mackey, also of the Bible Project. He started the whole project. Go check the video. Very, very interesting. He makes the point that the Hebrew writers are actually on purpose making things. They're making you blush. This thing is going in a direction. If I can use the same example, the dream. That dream is literally this guy knocking at her door, and at one point she says, "I've already taken off my clothes. Must I now put them on again?" Very suggestive. And the writers are trying to point you in a direction. This physical attraction with one another, it's heading in a direction. And I think this is a concept that many people today misunderstand. I misunderstood this when I was still dating my wife.
I'm glad.
We had the same thing where I can explain it like this. It was explained to me like this. Physical attraction is like a train, very tough to stop. And the way God designed it is exactly that way. Physical attraction to one another is supposed to lead in a direction. It's supposed to lead in the direction of sex. That's the biblical point, and God enjoys that. He loves it when a man and a woman committed in a marriage contract, if you can. Context is a better word. He enjoys it when those two people connect in that way. What Song of Songs gives us, I think, is that it builds up to that point where the next step would be for them to sleep together. Never goes there. Before that happens, there's this what I call a cutscene, where the woman says, "Stop."
Yeah.
And she calls on her friends. She's like, "Daughters of Jerusalem, I call to you by the does of the field and the deers in the forest, whatever, to not arouse love before it so desires." And it's so amazing. That happens 4 times. And the Bible doesn't say this specifically, but I think there's so much to learn out of that. And I said this as well in the sermon, but I think anybody reading this book, if you're married, great, read it and get some romance tips. If you are...
It might not work. T's and C's apply.
Yeah. I mean, sheep, like what do they say?
Teeth like sheep.
Yeah, woolly teeth. Never good. But if you're in a committed relationship and you're married and you have that commitment, that's what my ring stands for. I'm committed to my wife, and it's a public declaration that I'm committed to her. And when I take the ring off, I'm still married. That doesn't change it, but it's a commitment. Within that, read this book, catch some tips. God enjoys it when you enjoy your wife. If you are single, dating, or even engaged, read this book and ask yourself, how do they handle it when things get heated? How do they handle it when physical attraction starts stirring and gets pointed in a direction? You see you're moving in a direction, and everybody can resonate with this. That happens. We know this feeling where things are heading in a direction, and just ask yourself, how would I handle that? In terms of, we had this discussion just before we started recording where we said these are songs, these are poetry. And you actually mentioned that some of the guys say that this could be a romance play, where it's literally like scenes, and there's a scene where Solomon comes, and there's a scene where it gets heated, and it suggests that something's going to happen, and then it literally ends the scene and starts off, the characters go off stage and they come back, which is a really interesting way of thinking about it, because I think that boosts what I just said. I think if I were to watch a play like that and interpret it like they do, that's what I would take away, is that love is pointing in a direction. Physical attraction takes you somewhere. And the where it takes you is not good without the commitment.
Wow.
And I see, maybe last thought, is I see so many people, especially in secular societies where we live, where they don't it's harsh to say this, but they don't understand that it's unhealthy to be in that type of relationship without commitment. And I mean, even if you take religion out of this, if I can just for a moment just speak about that, there's literally statistics that speak of the divorce rate is higher for people who stay together before they have a committed marriage, before they commit to doing this. Because the thing for me, and this is true of me, when I got married that day, I closed the back door. There's no getting out. Divorce is not in my vocabulary. I'm in this for life. That's my commitment. And that creates a very, very solid foundation for me and my wife's relationship. You know what's not a solid foundation for a relationship? Sex. Because the feelings go away. Physical attraction goes away. That's the other thing that the Bible actually speaks of in Ecclesiastes. It speaks of that. So for me, this book teaches me and touches me in that way, that it speaks of the commitment necessary for physical attraction. Long response.
That's good, because my next question was going to be like, how did this affect you? And you've kind of just given that answer. The only other thing that I want to say to you is, you say that, well, the entire point of the series and the sermons is for us to inspire people to read the Bible books. I think this one is very much like Revelations for the New Testament. Curiosity does the job.
Yes.
While you were preaching, I sat near the back, and I looked up and I saw this guy, and he said, oh, we're starting in verse 1. And this guy kept on reading the entire sermon long. He finished the book in your sermon. I'm like,
Wow.
Yeah, you were curious about the Hebrew styles of love. And it's, dude, I love how it fits into this, because I'm going to just summarize what you said. Like the entire, and we finished our season, by the way, so we finished the wisdom books. And the entire wisdom books just kind of give us this way of like, how do we live? I feel that Job is how do we react in hard times. I feel Psalms is how do we approach God. I feel Proverbs and Ecclesiastes is how do you live life. And I feel Song of Songs is how do you live love kind of thing. And there's these very like godlike point of views on like, this is life and this is how you fit into it. Bro, so I actually do want to ask that question. How does this book affect your love life?
Yes, dude, I think that's a tough question, because as you said, the way that these authors talk about love and the way that they let's call it flirt, the way they approach flirting and the compliments they give to each other. If I go study this book and learn it off heart, and I go to my wife and I quote this book to her, she's gonna think it's really weird.
Yes.
Like it's not practical in that way. But I think the underlying themes of, how can I say this? To have a physical attraction to your wife is good. And to have an enjoyment of that person. You read the man's words, and you can hear this guy solidly enjoys looking at this woman. Which if we can quickly just speak to that, and we don't have a lot of time left, but in our modern world, we're surrounded by pictures of sex. We're surrounded by sexuality, and it many times it's distorted. I watched an incredible sermon series on just the way we handle, how can we say it, sexual influence in our life, was by Andy Stanley, and he says that any type of sexual imagery around us, be it media, television, whatever, it teaches men three things, and I'm focusing on the men with this, and he says that it teaches you, number one, that a real body is not good enough, because everything's fake. Secondly, it teaches you your wife's body is not good enough. And thirdly, it teaches you that one body is not good enough.
Wow.
Because it's all around. And I think that hit home for me. And when you read this book, that's what stands out for me, is that this guy is solely focused on this one girl. He even says, you are like a lily among thorns. It stands out. He just loves this woman. And I think for me personally, that's what this book means to me. It challenges me to really find joy in my wife. And I think that's from a married perspective. From, if I were to speak to somebody who's single, for example, you, I would, yes, he's available, ladies. If I could speak to guys like that, I would say read this book and cultivate that desire for one person that you're going to give everything. And then in that, if we can jump to the New Testament, to model what Jesus did.
Wow.
His love for the church is what I try to model as a husband, is to love her and give myself for her. She is more important than I am, and her needs are more important than I am. And that's a beautiful just testimony of what Jesus does for us. He did not count his life as more important than ours. He gave that for us. And I think that's the beautiful thing about marriage. It testifies, a healthy working marriage testifies of the love of Jesus to us. So that's my takeaway from the book.
It's such a nice privilege being married, because that's what you do. You're displaying the gospel to anyone and everyone.
Hopefully.
We pray. And
Yeah.
just one last question, very quick fire, yes and no question, maybe support, motivate your answer. Go. Is sex right?
Yes.
Motivate your answer.
In marriage. Yeah, I think the world puts it makes it a taboo subject. On one hand, it makes it taboo. On the other hand, it makes it cheap. I think the world and media and time's up. Stop. I think the world makes sex cheap. It's in every movie. It's in every series. Everybody sleeps with everybody, and it makes it cheap, and it makes it something that we don't like talking about. But for me, I think if you take pop culture out of it and you take media and television out of it, the Bible speaks of sex as a good thing that God created, even before the fall. God created Adam and Eve, and He knew her. That word is literally He slept with her, and it was good. It was part of the good creation. God created it good, and it's still like that. God loves it when a man enjoys his wife and a wife enjoys her husband.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Kobus, for diving into a book I knew I would not have. Guys, and join us next week. We are moving on. We're taking a break from this series of binge reading, and we're jumping into new topics, but we'll let you know as soon as we know. See you all again soon. Cool. GG.